And Rod, if you could introduce all your team plus Marion, but introduce Marion as well, so that
I'll introduce you.
Okay, so we've got in the middle, we've got to say no extraordinary business and no notices of motion. So we are on to item number 9. We would note that Henderson, you've had a piece of paper circulated by Henderson Massey, local board chair, Shane Henderson, who they did not want to come and present, so copy around the table. Right, Rod, please introduce all.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair. So my name's Rod Aitken, Head of Corporate Property, Auckland Council. On my left we've got Marion Webb, who's Manager of Portfolio Strategy at Panuku, and Sharon Coombs, who's Manager of Workplace Strategy and Portfolio Planning at Auckland Council. Steve Greenhoff, who's Project Director at Corporate Property in Auckland Council, and of course you all know Kevin Ramsey, who's General Manager of Finance and Corporate Property at Auckland Council.
So Rod, in going through the presentation, either when you're at the point of talking about, for example, Papakura, if you want to extrapolate a bit more to try and answer the concerns of the 3 boards that are presented.
Sure, yeah, we'll do that, and I'll rely also on people within the team. So we'll punch through a presentation that's a shortened version and a more concise version of the infographic piece in the report. And then we'll come to the feedback and summarise the feedback in the local context, and great discussions this morning, and also rely on other members at that point. So thanks very much. So just moving on. So just a bit of background first. So in August 2017, Regulatory Service announced its desire to move to a more consolidated operating model consisting of 3 hubs and 25 spokes. And at that point, the corporate property team signalled to the local boards, ward councillors, and all of our staff that we would actually be preparing a business case to that strategy to our executive. And then in February 2018, Council's executive leadership team approved that corporate property portfolio business case, which the recommendation was option 2, optimise part of this paper, in line with that, in support of that new operating model for our organisation and our operations team. And again, we signalled at that point to councillors, local boards, and all our staff. So this presentation to Finance and Performance Committee provides an overview of the problems relating to the corporate property portfolio, which is a regional asset, and particularly relating to what we call in the report option 1 status quo, and our recommended solution in dealing with those problems, option 2 optimise, and the benefits for council, and particularly our customers and the community, that the recommendation provides, option 2 optimise. So today, the decision that we're asking from Finance and Performance Committee is that we're seeking approval for the disposal of 7 corporate property sites, subject to the satisfactory conclusion of any required statutory processes, and ring-fencing the proceeds of sales for reinvestment into the corporate property networks and listing the sites there. 35 Graham Street, the Bledisloe Car Park, Kotuku House, Pacific and Tasman buildings at Orewa, 35 Coles Crescent, Papakura, and part of the site 82 Manukau Road, Pukekohe, and the Waitakere Admin Centre as part of 6 Henderson Valley Road. So it's important to note here, and there has been a bit of information in the media and also perhaps misinformation, but definitely information that's been spreading that. But it's important to note, as we've always signalled in the comms, that Council will maintain all customer service centres and local board spaces in the local board areas, and we'll talk more about that as we come through the presentation. So just briefly, so this is core to our strategy, is our people, but importantly, our ability of our people to deliver customer services in our communities. So we always have what's important for Auckland Council in mind. And this is about correcting some of the problems associated with the buildings locations, the buildings quality of those buildings, and how it's impacting customer service, and how it's impacting our people to deliver good quality customer service. So what we get to do with this strategy is address many of the problems with our buildings, but this is not a building approach. We leverage our building knowledge to deliver customer service in a better way, and to support our people to deliver customer service in a better way. And it's very important to recognise that. So what we get to do is deal to the problems with our large corporate office buildings, our local board and customer service centres and spaces, the many back office areas in our libraries and leisure centres, and importantly our records and archive storage, which impacts how we operate, and particularly in the regulatory world. And it's important to note that this is self-funded, so it's not a burden on ratepayers. So just a little bit of context, and this has been a question that's been raised a number of times at local boards, is that corporate property spaces are regional assets, they're centrally funded, and decision-making is a responsibility of the governing board. The sales proceeds from non-strategic assets are regional assets and are normally absorbed into the consolidated fund. But a council executive has shown their commitment to our people and how we deliver customer service by endorsing that the sale proceeds are ring-fenced back into the corporate property portfolio across the region to fix the problems with the way we're delivering our customer service. So this is a little, and it's in the presentation material, but this is how the material is structured for ease of understanding. So first of all, the problems which relate to our current portfolio, which we call option 1, status quo, and then our recommended solution, option 2, optimise, which corrects the locations, the building quality, the upgrades for our people and how our people connect with our customers, and also proved portfolio efficiency. And of course we lean on the benefits as aligned with our strategy to communicate what we're achieving. So first, the problems summarised around our buildings, which we call option 1, status quo. Sorry, a bit of a lag there, we'll go back. Sandra, can you go back a slide, please? Thanks for that. So one of the main problems we have with our portfolio is the inconsistent working experience, but it's actually more than that. So when you look at it, and we've done research through our portfolio, over 51% of our workspace has not been refreshed, and that's since well before amalgamation. So what we're doing is we're not empowering our people to perform their tasks well. We're not providing them with the right tools or the right workspace quality to ensure that they do their tasks in an efficient way, in a productive way, and also that impacts staff morale. Now, there's no funding model to fix the rest of those spaces. Also, many of our buildings are poor quality, so that impacts our people and our local boards and our customer service centres in terms of health and safety and in wellbeing. And I'll come to that a little bit more in following slides, because that's something that is fundamentally important that we address as being responsible for our staff and how they can deliver service. So it's not just our office space. You can see an image there of Graham Street, but from a portfolio view, which we need to do, it also impacts our local board spaces. There's an image there of Albert Eden Roskill. So that has, which is typical to a number of our local boards, poor quality space where they engage with their customers, and poor quality digital experiences, and also problems with damp as well. And the Otara Leisure Centre, which is a converted sick bay space with old furniture.
Can you just tell me where the Albert Eden picture's from? I don't recognise it.
Sorry, is that the Manurewa local board? Apologies for that.
Thank you.
Manurewa, we were there last week, and they complained, the local board there complained about how they can't engage well with their customers. And this is very typical of the spaces we engage with our customers because of the legacy fit out and the legacy digital. So they have to invite their constituents to come and present next to them, their presentations in the back of the space. And these are all things which take time and effort and cost to fix. So the other thing that I want to discuss with you is legacy locations. So we call those fragmented pre-amalgamation locations. Apologies for the jargon. But Council is developing systems, policies and processes for a One Auckland approach. Our One Auckland team and One Service Delivery, and in particular our regulatory and operations teams. So under option 1 status quo, we retain our fragmented office buildings, and that perpetuates legacy service delivery, legacy ways of working which is differentiated across the portfolio and in poor quality space, and also with poor reference to digital material and archives and records. So these are impacting our staff performance in the way they deliver service to our customers in the community. If we set up Auckland Council tomorrow, it would not be for these 10 locations. And in fact, the operations teams, as I call out, want to consolidate their efforts to support one team approach. We have problems with efficiency as well, and just as previously said, we've undertaken an extensive benchmark survey. So our current office space is 104,000 square metres. The benchmark requirement for this office space suggests we need about 58,000 square metres, and that's for the number of staff we have, but also the functions that we have and perform relating to customer service. So that's where we think the portfolio would stand if we were to shift and shape the portfolio to meet the business requirements in an efficient way. So there's north of 40,000 square metres on the table for review, which one might consider that's the opportunity we're trying to take hold of. So our effort is spread too wide. From a value for money perspective, ratepayer value is being eroded by the underperforming portfolio. From a cost avoidance perspective, we can just avoid significant capital and operational expense if we don't carry so much space. And in terms of waste, our focus is wide, our efforts are wide, and we should really focus only on what we can afford. So as that relates to from an efficiency perspective in terms of the next LTP cycle, we estimate there's $210 million required to keep the portfolio serviceable. And currently, as previously stated, we're $117 million short for that. So that's why we're here to review. One of the reasons we're here is customer service and funding. So under option 1 status quo with that lack of funding, or 117 million short, we won't be able to touch the local board spaces. We won't be able to touch the customer service centres, or the leisure centres or libraries back office spaces, or records and archive storage, or some building maintenance, or some office space refurbishment. And how that actually will pan out, because this is real money, real time playing out, is about 12 million per year or 1 million per month. That's ongoing now, that funding shortfall. So what we're trying to do is paint a picture here where we have a structured approach to dealing with the assets that are in front of us. And what we want to avoid doing is continuing to underfund our portfolio, more space than we need, to avoid getting ourselves into a position that the Counties Manuk, our DHB, is, where they're increasingly only funding reactive maintenance. And that's where we're heading with the portfolio now. And I want you to be aware of that, because I want a structured approach to dealing with the problem. And I realise that's not the hearts and minds, but that's the reality of what we're facing. And so it's very important that as a team, we work together to deal with the problem in a considered way. So we're looking to do this over a 5 to 6 year period in a considered way. This is not about a change tomorrow. It's a considered approach to dealing with the problem we're facing. So I want to just now spend some time on option 2, optimise, which is our recommended solution. So it's important to recognise that the property play is not the fundamental of this strategy. What is fundamentally important to recognise is that this is in response to an organisational strategy, and an organisation, in particular in operations teams, that's looking to modernise and be future focused on how it delivers customer service. And also it's an opportunity to fix the spaces for our people. But fundamentally it's about how the operations teams want to deliver customer service. And what we're looking to do is create a headquarters, a 3-hub model, which gives the opportunity to consolidate the operations teams and deliver more efficiency and effectiveness, along with a digitisation of records where possible. And also, and this is an important thing to recognise, is leverage the many underutilised back office spaces that are in disrepair to creating spokes. And spokes are agile, drop-in, bookable spaces, and they're designed to support deeper customer engagement with our staff, our regulatory staff in particular, and our operations teams more deeply within the community. And the design of the strategy is to ensure that we have greater coverage in Auckland in that way, in terms of the way we connect with our customers. We also recognise, of course, that we'll be protecting the local boards, that they will be operating in the same way, and the customer service centres will operate in the same way and in the same locations. I just wanted to dwell, this is new information, but this is not without thought, and we have over time undertaken benchmark analysis across the world, if you like. And just a few call-outs here. So the hub and spoke model is increasingly used successfully by other large organisations. For example, the UK Government Hubs programme has an aim of transforming the way the UK civil service can work as a modern employer. So the outputs from the UK Government Hubs programme, which was 2014, it was introduced, is a network of hubs and touchdown spaces, not unlike what we're proposing, and utilising other public sector spaces, libraries, job centres, etc., because that's the free space that we have already that we can deliver customer service if we take the opportunity to fix that space up. And the outcomes from that program was increased staff engagement, attraction and retention, so uplift in those things, supporting a cultural shift to flexible working, a 14% reduction in office footprint, reduced cost to taxpayer, releasing much needed, well-positioned land for better use, not for legacy use, for better use, such as housing. So the other examples, and there are many examples around the world, look, I've listed a few, it could go on, but UK Ministry of Justice, commuter hubs, New South Wales Government smart working hubs, IKEA Australia, ASB Bank New Zealand leverages its underutilised retail branch back office space in the same way, and also has a regional centre strategy for its sales staff to consolidate close to their those activities. So what's a solution that's fit for purpose for our people to deliver customer service? There's a strong relationship between workspace quality, engagement and productivity, and ultimately customer service. Workplace survey was undertaken in November 2017. So Graham Street has a 20-year-old fit-out or thereabouts, and what we noticed that which reinforced our view was that the Manukau Civic, which was recently partly refurbished, showed about a 28% uplift in how they perceive their productivity is increased due to the fit-out. So better spaces equals improved staff morale, we know that. Better spaces equals opportunities for greater engagement and productivity and customer service ultimately. So, but it's not only about our office space, and I just want to reinforce that. It's about our local board spaces, which are in varying states of disrepair, of poor space. But it's also about customer service centres and our library and leisure centre back office staff areas. So just quickly on the impacts for our large office buildings. So our model is aligned with the organisational strategy. So this is a horse leading cart solution. Our operations teams are looking to consolidate their activity. They've already done that in the south, and we're looking to respond to that more formally and take the opportunity to rationalise the portfolio. External factors, Auckland Transport, future growth areas, and locations where we can source large office buildings. Might have to give us a hand here, Sana, again. Thank you. So in the hubs and spoke, but it's important to recognise this is an integrated strategy, hubs and spokes. So it's smart and easy for our customers, our hubs supporting our operations teams to consolidate, and our spokes providing the opportunity for our regulatory and operations teams to extend deeper into our communities, leveraging existing space. Value and empower our people, providing quality spaces for all of our people, and of course value for money. We plan to operate from 45% less space. So I just want to run through the benefits quickly now. So in regards to smart and easy for our customers, we increase to 96% the percentage of Auckland's population living within 10 kilometres of our offices, and increase to 100% councils, 13 wards with face-to-face access to regulatory services. So providing customers more locations for easier access, more locations for Auckland Council staff to reach into wards, and all spaces will be refurbished, incorporating latest design thinking. And in terms of value and empower our people to perform their tasks well. So on the left-hand side, status quo, there's a $117 million shortfall to refurbish our current portfolio. And on the right-hand side, in a self-funded way, we'll be able to refurbish all of our office accommodation and create a new hub. Our 25 spokes will be created. 17 local board spaces will be refurbished and 4 new. 13 local customer service centres will be refurbished, 7 new. And 78 library and leisure centre back office areas will be refurbished. Skipped one there. So better value for our ratepayers and residents. So the funding required for option 1 is $210 million and $110 million for option 2. So there's a $100 million cost avoidance piece. In terms of cost, shortfall for option 1 is $117 million. Option 2 is self-funded. In terms of OPEX, we shift to a lower annual operating costs, 1.7 million savings. And from a 20-year NPV view at 5.6% council discount rate, it's $65 million positive. So no additional LTP funding required, and $100 million of unnecessary works avoided in space we no longer require. Just a little bit on wider considerations in terms of risk, and it was mentioned. So we're increasing, and the red line represents option 1 status quo, the 2, the optimised solution. So funding is obviously a risk for us in relation to option 1. Leasing is fairly neutral, but building quality is a significant risk that we're facing that we need to address. So if you look at Franklin, Papakura, Pukekohe, Papakura, the Orewa Pacific building in particular, and to a certain extent Henderson Admin building, those buildings are compromised in terms of their air conditioning and lighting in some cases in terms of other building qualities, which means that they could significantly compromise the health and safety and wellbeing of our staff over the next 10-year cycle if we continue to underfund those buildings. In terms of staff engagement, we've talked about lifting the quality of our spaces across the board with a strategy to reduce the risks and increase staff morale. And from a customer and community perspective, which is our main focus area ultimately, is that we'll be refurbishing all of our spaces in terms of our local board spaces, customer service centres, and creating spokes for deeper opportunities for engagement within the communities. So this is a way that we're de-risking the portfolio by this strategy. Just a little bit on Maori responsive, Whiria Te Muka Tangata. So the corporate property teams recognise that for partnership with Manu Whenua, early engagement is important in the local context. So we've reached out to Graham Parker in Te Wakanganua and also with Te Warena in the Auckland Design Office, and that we've started to work with them as experts within the council on how we would engage in the local context with mana whenua and particularly to get the right outcomes, integration and valuing te ao Māori, the Maori worldview, whanaungatanga, rangatiratanga, manaakitanga, kaitiakitanga, joined up multifaceted thinking, ensuring cultural, economic, environmental and social outcomes for Maori. So we're committed to that, and we recognise the expertise within the Auckland Council to assist us with that. And we'll be guided by Te Aringa Design Principles Framework. So why do we need to act now? This is a 4, 5, 6 year strategy, but the reason we need to act now is because we need to do this fundamentally before we read the text in a planned way, because we don't want this to play out the way it is playing out in Tauranga Council and the way it's playing out in the Counties Manukau District Health Board. We want we either get the funding required to fix our buildings up, or we work out a planned way to exit some of the excess space that we need. And we recognise that takes commitment to working with the ward councillors and the local board. And if you read the documents submitted, we're committed to working with the local board to find the right solutions, development solutions in the local context. And I think you'll realise when we come to it that we've met most of the requirements in the local context, although we understand that this is a hearts versus minds challenge, so we need to work together. But just returning back to the slides, so financially, we need to do this in a planned way for our buildings and for our people, but we are also exposed to 1 million per month, so if we don't start to do this now, we'll be start to expose to that risk financially. And the program requires self-funding, so that's a given. And selling now, because we don't need to move now, but selling now with leasing protecting the occupancy of the sites we sell for a period is a much easier proposition to take to the market commercially, and also generates, we estimate through valuations of excess of an additional $10 million. And what we don't want to do is sell our assets in a hurried way, vacant, and sort of get ourselves into a bit of a pickle like we have potentially with the CAB building, vacant, with problems and with no lease tail. So by engaging early, we're signalling to the market that we're doing this in a planned way and with lease tails. In terms of timing, the market conditions are strong. Now the advice we have is that no one can be certain on that, but you would take that the advice we're having is that it won't last forever. We revert back to a piecemeal approach if we start to pull out property. So it's very important to recognise that the strength of this is the fact that it's a regional asset. So it's important to recognise that we can distribute the funds where they're most required to support the operations we need to support. If we start to pull out buildings, will impact on what we can do. Pulling out a building not only signals that we lose the cost avoidance piece, but we also lose the value release piece. And that will quickly mount up to millions, which will destroy the opportunity to get to the local board spaces and the back office areas that our staff require. We recognise from a timing perspective that meaningful engagement with local boards, with mana whenua, takes time, and we're committed to that. And operationally, there's increased operational risk the longer we delay this, impacting staff productivity, wellbeing. Our biggest risk, if you like, is delay the decision that needs to be made. So I'm just going to shift now into a bit of a summary of the local context. And given the feedback, the good feedback that we've received from local boards, then I'll also ask the team to join in to just offer some extra information, but we'll punch through this reasonably quickly. So in terms of 35 Graham Street in the CBD, building there, so no Maori cultural interests were advised. Commercially, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei have expressed interest, and subject to the resolution, we'll circle back pretty quickly to those people. The local board feedback is that to approach the Ministry of Education, which of course we will do, and we'll work with the local board to achieve that. And the local board feedback was to protect the heritage mural and the seawall, which of course we will do, and we'll make that as part of the sale proposition. In terms of 4 to 10 Merrill Drive, this is a great opportunity for Auckland and a great opportunity to partner up with the local board and how we get the best outcome for Auckland at this site. I mean, it's just an amazing site, an amazing opportunity. You've got the CRL, you've got the integration to Aotea Square, you've got the proximity to our corporate buildings. So this is an opportunity we need to realise in a very commercial and also a very good way for the Aucklanders, and an exciting opportunity. There is a resource consent that applies now to this space, and that was lodged by Auckland Transport. So the airspace is protected, but this is merely a resource consent protecting the floor area. And you can see on the plan here, and this is only more of a diagram because it's not a detailed drawing, this is the Merrill Drive and the through-site link here between Bledisloe House to Aotea, and, sorry, to both parties, I'm not pointing, but Merrill Drive here, the link between Bledisloe and the site, through-site link. This is the escalator here down to the CRL. Now what we need to do, and we have discussed this with the local board, and we will certainly work with them on this, is we need to ensure that a development is done in an appropriate way. First of all, from the public realm, Auckland Design Office are experts there, how it integrates with Aotea Square. Regional Facilities Auckland, Panuku, of course, will have great input into that. And then fundamentally how it links into the great opportunity that is the continuous rail loop in the train station. What we don't want to do is bury our heads in the sand and miss the opportunity to get an integrated design outcome that makes sure that the foundations are put in the right position with CRL. So we want to partner up, we want to make the decision now at the right time so this doesn't become a linear development 10 years down the track, a car park still, with poor foundation locations. We need to make sure we work strongly with the local board, with our experts within council and our councillors where appropriate to get the right outcome for Auckland in terms of the public realm, how it integrates with the CRL, how it integrates with Aotea Square, and the opportunities there for us to take in an ordered and structured way, now being the right time. So we did discuss that, of course, with the Waitemata local board. Maori cultural interests, none were advised. Commercially, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei and Ngāti Te Ata Wāhua have expressed interests, and of course we will involve them in discussions. And the local feedback was exactly what I've talked about fundamentally, and a few others, to produce appropriate development framework, and we discussed that with them. And we, of course, will comply and involve the local board in those discussions. Ensure the laneway beside the Bledisloe House is sufficient width. Well, not only that laneway, but its integration with the CRL and through-site and the public realm is a very important part of the framework we've put in place. And, of course, we'll comply with that request from the local board. And that we're asked about CRL's requirements for that site. So CRL require that site as a development landing for their construction material through the duration of the building of the tunnel. Then it returns back to council. And so we're already in talks with CRL about making that available for them. So the Auckland Council fleet cars will move off that site circa February, March next year. And in terms of the public realm, we'll respect that and the integration into the CRL box. Further local board feedback was to investigate the benefits of leasing the land back, long-term lease, perhaps like the Wynyard Quarter, the 120-year lease, I believe it is down there. And of course we will look into that and comply with their requirements to look into that and present the value of those options back to them so they can make an informed review on that option. 6 Henderson Valley Road, which is all of that site here, including Civic, part of the corner there, the public realm, the train link bridge, the admin building, admin, Civic, and the train link bridge. So from a Maori cultural perspective, Te Kaua Maki have expressed interest as it relates to tahinga. And we support in resolving the tahinga matter. A letter has been sent to Te Warana by Councillors Penny Hulse and also Ross Clow as Chair of the Environment Committee and also Chair of F&P, outlining what they believe is the best way forward, which has been discussed in consultation with Te Warena. So that issue has been dealt with in that way by those parties. In terms of Maori commercial interests, Ngāti Whātua Araki have expressed interest in the site. Of course, we'll contact them, as well as Ngāti Te Ata Wāhua. And the local board feedback is that they endorse retaining the civic building, the smaller building, for use as a local board customer service centre and spoke. And corporate property support that decision. They support that decision because the building is of good quality and it's right sized to support the functions. And we recognise that building that supports that ongoing, and so it will be retained for those functions. That's the site there. In terms of 35 Coles Crescent, Papakura. So I'll ask other members of the panel to add value here, but in terms of Maori cultural interests, none were advised. Commercially, none were advised. The local board feedback delayed the decision on the unlock decision, and the sale of the we're saying the sale of the site will not impact the unlock decision, but I'll ask perhaps Marion to just dwell on that.
Sure. This committee has asked Panuku to consider other unlock locations, Papakura being one of them. So I'm not in a position to advise what that is at this point, but just to say that we will be reporting back to this committee in August. However, in the meantime, we have agreed with the Papakura local board that we will consider the corporate property building and other properties within the Papakura local board area as support sites. So we will look to achieving development outcomes on those sites. And indeed, for two of the sites that the local board chair mentioned earlier, we're due to talk to them actually later this month about those two sites. So we have definitely committed to viewing the sites as support sites, as I mentioned. Other than that, we can't comment about the unlock proposition.
Okay. Thanks for that, Marion. So before I pass to Steve Greenhoff, who will respond with some further information, so we have had a number of discussions with the local board, and we're keen to, obviously, we support and endorse, which has been described before, retaining and subdividing off the existing park playground, time capsule and historic restrooms. And we're keen to work with the Papakura Commercial Property Group to find the best outcomes for the local board. So we do recognise, and we have listened and we have heard to their requirements, and we're keen to work with the local board to find the best outcome for that site. And I think there's a recognition on all sides that the building is not of a state that's suitable for Auckland Council. But I'll just pass to Steve Greenhoff, who might have some additional information.
Yeah, Rod, could you just go to the next slide maybe? I think with Papakura 35 Coles Crescent, it's probably easier to look at the visual. So we've consulted with the local board a number of times, and their views have become very clear, and they were expressed today. One of their main concerns is about retaining the reserve and the playground. The area sort of highlighted in red there is the area we're proposing to be subdivided as a reserve, including the playground invested to remain with council. That area also includes some of the other Papakura local board's concerns, which was around the time capsule. So again, keeping that within the reserve, we were looking to understand if there's some way of protecting the time capsule, but we'd need to talk to the heritage people about that, but it's protected in the sense it's within the reserve. The historic restrooms are part of a current plan change to become a historic building. We're proposing that that remains in the reserve area. Unsure of a potential use for it, but what we would like to do is align what we're doing with the plan change to make sure that we're sort of joined up in that way. And I understand that plan change is going through reasonably soon. The remainder of the site is dominated primarily by the council building. The building itself, as the local board has said, they're not particularly tied to. It's really a matter of a development outcome for the site. So we're committed to providing, to working with the local boards to come up with a development framework. They talked about potentially the local board office and the customer service centre being part of that. If we could underpin a development outcome on the site, that would be a great result. But we would want to work with Panuku and the local board to agree that final development framework.
So Steve, is that other bit of green space just canopy, is it?
Sorry?
The green part above is just canopy, is it?
Yeah, I think that's parking. It's supposed to go out as far as the land goes. It was quite hard on that map to get it to the extent of the to see where the extent of the land went.
That's car park.
Yeah, it's car park.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. So in terms of H2 Manukau Road, Pukekohe, we can see here on the site, again, an older building, but as talked about earlier, has this very strong adjacency with the Pukekohe train station and the railway line. So no Maori cultural interests expressed and no commercial interests expressed over the site. So we're very keen to work with the local board to find the best outcome from that site. So I'll say that straight up, and that's been the tenure of our conversations. In terms of providing an alternative space for the local board, we did express our commitment to work with the local board to find the best outcome for the local board space. And we recognised and accepted that the best space for the local board was not in Franklin, the centre. So I'm just not too sure what was expressed, but we are committed to not pushing any local board into space that's not appropriate, doesn't provide appropriate facilities. This is an opportunity to fix our local board spaces, not to take retrograde steps. So we are committed to finding the best outcome for the local board there. We're not keen to move them into Franklin, the centre, so I just wanted to clarify that. And that was expressed at our last meeting with them, and I thought accepted. We're quite keen to support a park and ride facility.
Pukekohe is one of the Panuku development priority locations, and we have been consulting with the Franklin Local Board with respect to the future use of the sites in Pukekohe, and indeed with Auckland Transport as well. Auckland Transport have committed to producing a car parking strategy for the future, which will tell us what the future of Pukekohe holds in terms of the requirement for car parking. They have assured us and the local board that this strategy will be completed by June, and at that point we will be willing and able to consult with Auckland Transport with respect to the viability and possibility of a park and ride facility within the Pukekohe Town Centre.
Thanks for that, Marion. We're just reinforcing, because it came up again in earlier discussions, we're committed to working with the local boards to find the best outcomes for all of these sites that we're releasing. And that is a commitment that we're prepared to make. And we are making. Katuku House in Manukau. So no Maori cultural interests. Commercially, Te Aki Tai Waiahua have expressed interest, and we will circle back with them, as have Ngāti Te Ata Waiahua. The local board feedback have requested that all funds from disposal are invested back into the Manukau Civic Building. Our position, of course, is that the funding from sales are centrally managed, but recognise that significant investment is being made in the south and particularly in the Manukau area with the new hub extension onto the Civic Building. In terms of 50 Centreway River, you can see a picture of the building there. It has been discussed, the Tasman buildings and the Pacific buildings, Pacific being it's closer to the Pacific Ocean. And you can also see here the Centreway Theatre and the car park that's been used by the Centreway Theatre. So from a Maori and cultural interest, none were advised. From commercially, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei and Ngāti Te Ata Waiahua have expressed interest in those sites. And the local board feedback confirmed a purpose-built local board office service centre in Hibiscus and Bay's local board area. So, of course, we're committed to providing continuity of local board service and also customer service centre and a spoke in the Orewa area. and there's an opportunity to move those closer to the centre of Orewa. And we're committed to refurbishing the Orewa local board site in Browns Bay. And just as it relates to Rodney, yes, there is of course the opportunity to fund through this program the Rodney local board area in Warkworth as their preferred location. Of course, there'll be further discussions on that. And there's a little bit of confusion around 2 Rodney local boards. That's not what's been promised by any measure, but what we do say to all the local boards is that armed with the right tools, the right digital tools, they can leverage any large meeting room space in their local board area. So Rodney could choose to have a local board meeting in Kumiu if they chose to, because there is a sufficiently sized meeting room space in that area. We of course won't be building a new local board in that area. Their local board will be in Warkworth or the area they choose. So just moving on, so the location options will be fully discussed with the local board. Of course we will, and we'll not only comply with that, we'll work closely with the local boards to find the best outcomes for the local boards to uplift the property and to create the right customer service centre and spoke in their area and refresh their local board. We of course will approach the Waitemata DHB for a potential sale on that site and protect access to car parking to centre stage, which is noted in this plan here, vesting the drive and creating the car park and the theatre protected carved off. Steve, you might like to just provide further clarification.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the centre stage itself is on 60 Centreway, and that's I think where the boundary or the zoning changes. The site we're talking about is 50 Centreway, so if you can see there's the sort of light blue line that runs by those bubbles on the left-hand side, that's the change in the site. Obviously by that, so if we were to dispose of 50 Centreway, it would be landlocked, so we recognise that. Plus also I think it's got 35, 40 car park, or 30 car parks there on site, bearing in mind, you know, if they've got 160 people, I think someone said, we had understood as about 200. If you've got 200 people going to a show, they're going to need parking and they're going to need access to it, so we recognise that. We'll need to work through the best location to provide access and to get car parks. The planners will be, you know, better, more expert than we are to determine that. But we're committed to providing that car park, you know, appropriate car parking and appropriate access to it. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of clarify one other point as well, because there's been reference to a poll made in the Rodney Times. And 74% being a sort of against the what we're proposing in this recommendation. Part of the problem with the poll, and I don't know if people have seen it, but the question wasn't quite what we're proposing. So the question was, will the community benefit from the removal of the Orewa Service Centre? So of course the community won't benefit from that, but we're not proposing removing the service centre. We will relocate the service centre. And it's difficult to look at.
Inappropriate, Councillor Lee. Inappropriate.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
No, carry on.
Good.
Okay.
Wasn't
Yeah.
worth listening to.
Okay. And look, and it's difficult to see. It's difficult for us to understand how that relates. I think of that that's based on 31 votes, so it's difficult to understand how that relates to people in the community. But we have heard the local board. And their feedback as representatives. It's fair to say, even with that question, which is not necessarily the correct question, 10% of people supported the removal of the service centre and 17% didn't know where it was. So, you know, even with that misleading question, it's, you know, there's still probably a quarter of the community that would support it or don't know where it is.
Okay.
No, I think the only other thing, sorry, on Centreway that I just wanted to talk to was the suggestion about leasing Pacific building. So I think currently, or historically, Zealand have rented about a 500 square metre space. That's gone down to about 250 square metres now in a 8,000 square metre building. Of that remaining 250 square metres, that's currently empty as I understand it, and we don't have anyone teed up to take it. So whether there's, in the long term, an opportunity to rent 8,000 square metres in Orewa, I'm unclear.
Okay.
Doesn't appear to be a demand there as we see it at the moment.
All right, thanks very much,
Might be
Steve.
difficult to sell it then.
So that's the end of the presentation, and I just want to remind you of a few fundamentals. So obviously we've been asked to deal with this within the rules that we have. It's as a centrally funded regional assets, but we recognise the importance of the local context, and I hope we've been able to explain that to make sure that the local boards have input and feel that their input is not only listened to but heard. And that's important that we do that. But fundamentally, this is about providing customer service and recognising the need to provide quality space for our people to deliver customer service. And thank you very much, and back to the Chair.
Right, thank you. Now, we're just going to flick up a new B, which may help with some concerns of some people. So, agree that for each property to be disposed of, development framework outlining future strategic outcomes will be communicated to the respective local board for their feedback and input. So, that's been put in. We have a mover, which is myself, and a seconder, which is Councillor. We then have had two other amendments tabled, and Councillor Newman's was first, so he will get the chance to speak first. To ask questions, I should say, and then Councillor Watson, Councillor Walker and Councillor Simpson. So, Councillor Newman.
Yeah, look, thank you. I've listened to your presentation. It's about the fourth time I've heard variations of that. And after the fourth time, the entertainment level's going down for me, I have to say, but I've been listening. The question that I have, I've read the report which is on the agenda today versus the report that was on the 17th of April Finance and Performance Committee agenda, which was pulled. Can you confirm to me that the changes in terms of the recommendations, the only changes that apply are Roman numeral 3, which is 6 Henderson Valley Road. So we've gone from 16,000 square metres down to 7,200, and at Roman numeral 6 at 35 Coles Crescent you've gone from 5,059 square metres down to 2,500. Is that it in terms of the recommendations change between last month and now?
I think in terms of sort of figures, that is. I think the Papakura site, 35 Coles Crescent, that the original drafting was probably an error, and that we just hadn't clarified that correctly. So we were always intending to subdivide the land off. We just hadn't clearly stated that.
Okay. And there's some changes in the narrative of the report, but beyond that, there's no other changes.
To the main essence of it, in terms of the disposal recommendation, we were originally asking for disposal of 7 properties. That remains. We've tweaked the Papakura numbers because that wasn't reflective of what was happening, and then the civic building is now no longer part of the recommendation.
Okay, so I understand the narrative of the report. As a procedural question, can you just clarify as to why, did you ask for the report to be deferred from last month to now? I mean, how did that happen? Can you talk through that?
I can't personally, I wasn't here.
Oh.
Yeah. Perhaps the Chair, I can just elaborate on that one. Look, the report was tabled. As we do, we have pre-agenda run-throughs. We actually look at the context of the report, and it was believed that it didn't really articulate the full messaging that actually been undertaken through the consultative process. So, as well as those small changes to the recommendations, I hope you'll see the body of the report actually is just some more of the actual consultative process involved. It actually outlines more clearly what was actually the conversations that were had and what the actions are that are being proposed by the corporate property. It was just to complete a more robust package to then lead to the recommendations, which are fundamentally still the same.
Because between the paper that was on the agenda for the April meeting and this month, there has been quite a lot of new discussions take place. Who mandated those discussions too as to change those recommendations?
Yes, Chair of Finance, I decided that we'd, after consultation with the staff, all the senior staff, we decided, and the Deputy Chair, that we would pull that report and put it into this month.
And the consultation that took place to inform the changes, because the changes are not throughout the whole recommendations, but they are significant in relation to 2 sites.
Yeah, look, through the Chair, rather than consultation, it was more a case of additional engagement to just to ensure that the members of this group, as well as the local boards, fully understood what was intended by the recommendations that were coming through. So I wouldn't call it consultation as such, more of engagement to explain what the strategy was proposing, to make sure that was much more explicit.
Right, Councillor Watson.
Thanks. My question goes to your presentation, attachment H, page 94, where you discuss initially the significance and engagement policy and say how there's no specific legal requirement to consult. But your last sentence, which is the key sentence as far as I'm concerned, says, however, the council may still choose to consult on sites where there is an intrinsic link to the land. Who do you think is in the best position to establish whether there's an intrinsic link to the land? Is it the local board and the local community, or is it perhaps officers in corporate headquarters? Who's best placed to establish that?
I have no opinion on that. I don't know. I don't know. We were advised. This was the advice that we were given on the significance and engagement policy, and we've been tried to just be transparent on that.
Okay. So I would maintain in a number of the instances we've heard today, there is an intrinsic link to the land, and the people best placed to establish that are the people who were presenting to us today. You were saying, I think, Steve, you were talking about that Rodney Times poll and how the public may or may not feel about this. As officers, are you interested in finding out how the public do feel about that, given the inadequacy of any surveying or no consultation to date?
Of course we would, yeah.
Okay. And I guess, so I appreciate that. That's I think what the local boards were asking, certainly what the Hibiscus and Bays one was. And my final comment, which is along a similar line, Rod, and it goes to your repeated comment that you're committed to working with ward councillors and local boards to find the best outcome, and you'll appreciate that in a number of instances there have been recent developments, recent thoughts. It's given the rushed nature of that. So I guess my question is, in light of the potential for consultation and finding out what the community wants, would you see that as being part of a commitment to getting the best outcome?
Yeah, look, I think we've consulted a lot with the local boards and ward councillors. You know, it's been over 400 hours that we put into consultation with local boards, and we do rely on the local boards to provide the community lens and get that feedback through that. So we have relied on that through consultation with the local boards.
Right. So we understand here there's a 6-year program. We know it's the Tasman building, a new lease has just been entered into. Do you think maybe not 6 years, but a year or 6 months or 3 months or whatever would be ample time or sufficient time to continue that commitment and to engage with the community given this intrinsic link to the land? Is there enough time in the 6 years, do you think, to have that consultation?
The main issue as it relates to OREWA is the significant shortfall we've got on the planned maintenance spend. So that equates to, on that one building alone, is $1 million a year, so that's nearly $100,000 a month.
Yeah, we understand the local context and the requirements of the local community and in spaces they require. But also tempering that, our operations teams don't require space that that building provides. And also there are some maintenance issues, particularly with the Pacific building as it relates to
okay, yeah, I get all that. I'm saying in light of the commitment to work in light of the intrinsic link to the land? Is there a willingness to consult and find
Councillor
out?
Watson, I'm just going to overrule you on that one because you're asking them effectively to say, do you support my amendment?
No, I'm not. I've referred to attachment H and quoted the exact wording. That's not my amendment.
Yeah.
So do we mean those words or do we not? Are they just there for window dressing? Is what I'm trying to establish. It's a simple question. It seems they mean something, do they?
Look, yeah, so perhaps I can just make a couple of comments through the chair. Look, the fundamental notion we're crossing over between here is, and it can be missed through this report, is the notion of a physical bricks, mortar, concrete, wood, steel building versus the provision of services to our customers. And what this is really getting to in the significance policy, one of the reasons why it was deemed it wasn't needed, because we're not changing the level of services provided to our communities. The services will continue. The physical building it is provided through may change. That still has to be worked through. So the consultation is not needed because we're not going to change the services to our customers.
No, that's not what you say. You say here you can choose to consult on sites. This is a site we're talking about where there is an intrinsic link to the land, which goes beyond just what you're saying there. It's a wider context.
Yeah, so through the chair, that was my second comment now. So the significance consultation piece where you are required is where it is changing services. That's the primary driver. What this is also saying, though, is may. If you so decide, you may decide to have consultation with your public if you believe that the intrinsic link to the land exists. For some other reason, the physical location is very important to the people. That's another consideration. But the fundamental call not to consult with the public was because we are not going to change the services we provide. If anything, we're going to improve those by providing more access to the communities by spreading those spokes further.
We have that option.
Yes, as an option.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Sure, just got a few questions. And that's around what consideration has been given to any civic strategy that council might have. And when I say civic, I mean, for example, this venue, which is the Town Hall, the Aotea Centre. And the rationale for that is the purpose and part that all of these facilities that we're talking about, or many of them, served. So what was in your brief around that consideration?
Yeah, perhaps I start and then Kevin can add. So fundamentally we're looking at corporate office space, local board space and customer service centres. And we're absolutely looking to put the corporate office space in the locations and of the right size to support our staff. And we're looking to protect the local board and customer service space within the local board areas. Where they're displaced by buildings, then we'll consult with the local boards to find the right location for those. So that's what the strategy is about. So no, we haven't necessarily considered the civic value that might be associated with those buildings from a perhaps history.
Okay, so...
But can I just ask Kevin to just add to that?
I mean, that was sufficient from my perspective.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Again, it does tie back to the notion of, are we talking about the civic heart being a physical location based on the buildings, or is it actually due to its proximity and how people are actually utilising that space? There are many, many cities of the world where buildings have been destroyed through various mechanisms and they've been rebuilt and the heart has remained, even though the physical buildings have actually gone.
Understood. So I've got that, Mr. Chair. My purpose was to establish whether that had been a consideration. The short answer is it hasn't been. And I just make the observation that that is partly the reason why some locations are being revisited, Henderson, for example, because of those considerations. The other question I've got, and I mean, in part it goes to this civic strategy, and it goes to the Bledisloe site. Has there been any consideration of the future use of that site for corporate office facilities and or civic facilities? And part of the context of that, Mr. Chair, is that we know that this council may require a new civic facility for a meeting place, and we've had previous reports on that. So I just wonder if those things have been considered for that site.
Yeah, we certainly have to play within the world that's put in front of us. So we're significantly underfunded to deal with the size of the portfolio now and in terms of maintenance as well. So we don't have funding to be developers for those purposes when we already have those spaces. For example, this town hall building, which obviously we're retaining. So we don't have any requirements that have come forward to us specifically to take on the development ourselves for the Bledisloe car park site.
So my question again, was there any consideration of the Bledisloe site for corporate office and or civic facility? I mean, a yes or no will do for me.
Well, no, it's important to answer that. So we're currently covered by the Bledisloe building and 135 Albert Street, which meet 135 Albert Street, Auckland House, which meet our requirements in the CBD for office accommodation in terms of a hub and a head office function.
Through you, Mr Chair, I think my concern goes to previous consideration of selling 135 Albert Street. That was a potential possibility considered before. Housing the various council-controlled organisations that occupy a considerable space, and I'm assuming that that might be considered in terms of a corporate office strategy. So I'm just really putting the question as to whether Bledisloe was considered, particularly given its proximity to the civic centre of Auckland.
So in terms of that space, we could choose to lease space if a developer developed it.
The capital, sorry if I may add in there through the chair, the capital to develop that site would be significant. I would imagine hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah. If we develop that as Auckland Council, there'd be a question of whether we could secure the funding. I don't know that we've got it in the, I don't think it's in the LTP to do it. Then it's a matter of if we sold it and took space in it as a lease, that because it would be a new building, the rental profile for that would be significant and probably beyond the means I would expect as well.
It'd be twice as much as leasing a space equivalent to 135 Albert Street to lease space in a new development that would be built on that site.
Well, I mean, we haven't had a report on that, but
so Rod, can you just confirm how many floors of 135 are actually leased out at this stage?
Yeah, 3 floors are currently leased out at 135 Albert Street. But that's space that's available when those lease terminates, if we require them.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Look, thank you, Rod.
You can come back to me.
I understand, I know it's a finance meeting and I kind of understand the finances, but for me it's really about doing the right thing. So how does the strategy, in simple terms, really work better for Aucklanders? That's the communities, the residents and ratepayers of Aucklanders, not just today, but in the future. Yep. Because for me, that's the fundamental question.
Yep, no, that's a good question. So look, it's very future focused. So you've got to understand that our buildings, which are bricks and mortars, which tie us to locations, are in legacy locations, and some of those buildings are compromised, so it's difficult for our customers to engage with those buildings because they're old buildings, old fashions, the way they engage with the communities. For example, local board spaces up and where lift access is compromised. So we're very focused on providing a footprint that supports a future-focused Auckland Council and how it engages with the community. And as I showed in those examples, how other organisations, large organisations, both in the commercial sector and local government in large cities, they look to consolidate their teams to drive efficiency and one operating style and leverage deep into their communities by creating agile spaces that can be more easily attained, which can be reconfigured, which can change and to form new growth areas. So it's all about how it ties together with digital strategies, how we digitise our documents and archive storage, and this is what our operations and teams want to do, but also how we provide quality spaces and meet the challenges with our local board spaces and our customer service centres. So this provides the funding to sort out the customer service centres, the local board spaces, and to position Auckland Council to respond to a future-focused workforce.
So thank you. So supplementary to that, so even if we did find the money, even if we did find the 117 million, what are you really saying then, that it still wouldn't deliver the best value for money, not just the value for money, but the best service for Aucklanders, the community residents and ratepayers of the Auckland of the future?
Yeah, so like through the chair, putting aside the civic question, which I recognise is a different question, but in terms of how we operate, if we just fix up our old buildings, we're tying ourselves to legacy locations and fragmented service delivery. And also we're not taking the opportunity to fix up our storage and archives, which is fundamentally important to digitising our workflows in a more future-focused way. So that 117 million only deals with the legacy portfolio and getting them serviceable. It doesn't actually change the way we work or change the way we undertake customer service, which is what the organisation is trying to be more future-focused on and work more digitally. So no, those won't be achieved.
Thank you. For me, that's the key. Those are the key questions. Thank you.
Right, I have Councillor Cooper, Casey, Cashmore, Darby, Hulse and Hypery and Councillor Walker.
Just one quick question. I've heard of you express that the buildings we do sell are going to be hocked off cheaply. Is that true? We go to the market, and I wouldn't like to think so, but
no,
I also don't want that out in the public, that people are saying that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think we're obviously going to try and maximise as much as possible. There'll be a tension there between development outcomes that are local outcomes and trying to maximise value of the site.
So
they certainly won't be hocked off cheaply.
No, and so just in terms of if there are links with Panuku, either support, unlock or transform, there might be developer agreements that sort of slight trade-offs to get better community outcomes. So that would be the only reason, just so that we could get a better outcome.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank
I mean,
you.
maybe Mary could maybe
comment on that.
Sure.
So absolutely, Panuku is keen to work with the corporate property team on any sale of the assets. Panuku, in line with our purpose and our statement of intent, will seek to extract value for the ratepayer out of these assets whilst maintaining a balance between the public good outcomes that the communities and the council would like to achieve.
Thanks very much.
It's important to recognise that selling these buildings with a lease tail is worth quite a considerable amount of money. What we don't want to do is degrade our buildings, make late decisions and sell them in degraded condition and also vacant.
Yeah, I guess like Tauranga, who will have to actually pull their building down because it's full of black mould and they left it too late and now they don't have a building to sell. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Casey.
Harold, you were in the room when I asked the Hibiscus and Bays Local Board about the financial information that was withheld. Would you like to address that issue? And my position is that they're co-governors and they're as bound by the Local Government Act as we are. So if it's confidential, that's not a reason for not disclosing it to them. So that's what you say. So it really annoyed me when I read this sentence, and I'll read it out to you. The full financial implications contained in the business case is commercially sensitive and confidential, including information on net disposal proceeds. So my answer to that is so.
Well,
maybe I can answer that. So, my understanding with that particular local board was they'd asked to see the net present value calculations. The hesitation in providing them was that we hadn't disclosed those to governing body at that time. We subsequently did provide those to the Hibiscus and Bays local board. I had understood that they were happy with that, and that's where that statement in the report has come from, that we had understood they were comfortable with those. And I thought that they said that they confirmed that they had been provided the information when they talked some time ago.
Did you hear the response of the local board chair this morning about being unable to access information about leasing arrangements and costs?
I don't recall that particular statement, but I was just concentrating on the MPV
to be honest,
sorry,
we wouldn't have access.
Yeah, through the chair. Look, we can fully disclose leasing arrangements to the local board and we wouldn't withhold that information, so I'm actually surprised that that has been brought up today. It's a small lease, 250 squares is the status of it. It's literally, you know, this room, less than this room, over an 8,000 square metre building. There's no reason why we would withhold that information, and certainly I'll be following up after this meeting with talking to them to provide that information. It is tough to lease space up there. It's not core activity. We won't be able to lease out a whole building easily. Very difficult and we will be focusing on stuff that shouldn't be core to our activities. We did have those discussions. We did circle back with them after the last, after the meeting was pulled, and disclosed more information around the financials, including, as Steve alluded, the NPV analysis, including the sensitivity analysis that ran through all of the numbers and how we did a sensitivity analysis to extract value regionally. We're very reluctant to disclose the valuations that we have done on the buildings for commercial reasons, that's all. And that's the advice we've received.
Quite understandable. Councillor Cashmore.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you for B. It certainly gives us considerable more comfort knowing that going forward there's going to be continued discussions. Just bearing in mind with those discussions, you're thinking about Papakura and how they wanted to get what's right for the area, and rightfully so. I agree to the same sort of degree. My patch is that Franklin, those Manukau Road offices there, and the park and ride on a regional perspective is absolutely critical because of the hinterland beyond the urban area where there is no PT. So how would that sort of incorporating that sort of park and ride into an agreement look like going forward with that, bearing in mind B? Just put some more certainty around that.
So with respect to exploring opportunities for a park and ride, a park and ride facility is a regional transport facility. Generally speaking, any kind of optimisation of a park and ride facility would have to be by agreement with Auckland Transport, based on the need for the transport asset, and we would look to incorporating, probably in this instance, some sort of other development to allow that transport service to be provided and maintained. So that it would be certainly through a development agreement, but any viability and feasibility would have to be kind of investigated first. So it's not necessarily a shoe-in, but it would certainly be investigated.
Thanks,
I've answered your
reserved
question.
speaking rights.
Right, Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. Rod, thanks for your report. Measured and thorough delivery. When I read the recommendations, initially I felt that they were a bit dry, but then the body of the report stresses the importance of achieving strategic outcomes. It's not just about a disposal for a financial return. With the staff, I've just worked up the B there, and I guess my question is, I need your input there. Am I using the right language in calling it a development framework, or is there something else? Because I'm assuming, as I read through your report and all the appendices, you are identifying the need to undertake quite deliberate work to achieve strategic outcomes before you arrive at disposal. Is that your intention?
Yeah, so the intention is that we need approval to go down this path, otherwise we can't do any of this. So you're right to assume that in the local context that we'll be looking to develop a development framework that captures the right requirements in the local context before we go to market. So it's not a fire sale, if that's probably a bad choice of words. It's about right outcomes. So we recognise there's financial outcomes, and this is always a tension, and there's also local outcomes and regional outcomes. So regionally, I've talked about the functional requirements for office space, for local board space, for customer service centres, and what's required by our teams to operate to deliver good customer service. And then the feedback that we've had, that we've listened to and heard, relates to the local context and the better use for those sites. Because there is acceptance, I believe, that of the condition of the building, and the information we provided presents the challenge to retain the buildings in their current form. It's not viable. And certainly commercially, developers won't come in and develop up and improve some of the buildings because they're beyond that state now.
Okay, second question, Chair, very briefly. So those strategic outcomes that are covered there, they might be a broad range of deliverables or investigation of those deliverables, like a park and ride on the site in the south, or it could be, the one that did concern me was the Bedderslow site, which is a very important site. And so that might be about public realm, procurement of architecture. It could be about the laneway connections and all that sort of thing. It could be about a health facility at Centreway. It could be about an inner city school at Graham Street. They are the sorts of things that I'm reading coming in from the boards.
That's right.
So are you satisfied that that can be picked up and undertaken thoroughly through the B?
Yeah, look, I am satisfied with that. That's what we're here for, is we're here to listen to the local boards and provide the outcomes that are right for the local context. So, and with regards to, for example, 4 to 10 Merrill Drive Bledisloe car park. So we've had discussions with Ludo Campbell-Reid on that, because he's the expert within council on the public realm, and he'll be interested in the way that building delivers the significant volume, that treats the public with respect and integrates with the CRL. So we've already started those connections to find the right development framework for that location with the experts within council and in consultation and review with the local board.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
If I can just add to that as well, for every, generally speaking, for every disposal that is undertaken, either through direct disposal to the market or with development outcomes, a strategic development strategy is created first, and I think that is what's reflected in B.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Marion. Member Tapu.
Oh, kia ora. Tēnā koe, Chairman. Ka nui te mihi ki a koutou I tēnei wā. I have a couple of questions. Sort of the context I want to provide is that I'm trying to look at this as a regional focus, what's in the best interest of Auckland across the board. Unfortunately, sometimes it can get trapped into localised, I need, I want, and sometimes we have to make compromises. It's also a reminder that value for money is also not necessarily about saving money. Councillor Simpson reminds me that often. And I guess my question really is, or the start of them is, you know, the packages of properties that have been put up here, are they crucially dependent on each other? Because, I mean, I see this talk of deferments and the like, and if there were reports coming back, such as Te Henga for 6 Henderson Valley, if they were not to go further for whatever reason because of the further reports, would that affect the package in terms of what's been proposed here? And if it did, how might you mitigate or remedy that?
Yeah, look, ultimately, from a dollars and cents perspective, you know, there's two aspects. There's cost avoidance, which is not insignificant on some of our buildings, and there's rates for that, but also value released. So pretty quickly you'll you know, destroy the integrated approach to this if we start taking out buildings. So from a dollars and cents perspective, then it'll be fairly impactful to separate out buildings from this.
If I may add, Chair, it's also a programme of works. We've looked at it, we've taken a whole of portfolio approach. So the historic approach has been to look at individual buildings and deal with them in isolation, and that's really why we're in this position now. So if we start to unpick that, we're really going back into the old way of looking at it. And then, you know, if we start to take out locations in terms of value release, then we have to start taking out cost. You know, and it's sort of a circular argument. We start going around in circles again. But also the programme of works itself is pretty linear.
Yeah, that's okay. You've answered the question that I was trying to get to. So again, the one about 6 Henderson Valley, Te Henga, a report to be coming back in June to this committee. Why would we pursue today that without that report first? It just seems, I'm not quite sure of the sequence of events here, and I'm not the one that's seeking to defer everything. But based on what I've seen in the reportage, there's a report coming back. Why? It's only a month away. Why wouldn't we be waiting for that report?
Mr. Parker?
Oh, Pryor?
Change your name again. It's about timing, really, the report that's coming back. There's been quite a lot of negotiation going on between Te Kaurawamaki and council staff about that venue, and this proposal is coming forward now. So it's all about the timing, really. And we've got agreement in principle with Te Kaurawamaki, just waiting for confirmation of that as we sit here.
Okay, well, I've just heard that a letter went, but I haven't heard that they agreed to the letter. So I just heard a letter went from the chair and from Councillor Hulse. Haven't seen any letter. Don't know what any response to that was. All I've got on my papers is a report June to come back and tell us something, which I don't even know what they're going to tell us.
we're waiting for the response from Te Kauramaki, all right, so that's yet to arrive. But that letter details really what we've discussed with them, so our expectation is that we're going to get a positive response to that, and then we can move ahead.
Us as we, of course.
Yes.
Us as we.
So...
I'm going to let Councillor Holst just...
It's okay. I mean, the questions have been answered for me.
Okay,
It's satisfactory to where I want to, I'm going. So I just want to be clear on, A, the package stuff. B, there's different propositions I hear in the room about deferments and the like. I'm concerned that may be an issue for the wider package, so that's the point I was getting to. I'm also concerned, though, to rush ahead without those reports and start making decisions is, I don't know, it's not the smartest business way in my life, so I'm struggling with that one. What I also want to know is about the 27B memorials. How was that advised to mana whenua when the consultation was undertaken by Panuku?
Through the chair, when Panuku undertook our engagement, we did that in writing to the relevant mana whenua of each of the areas, and the package included each of the properties and the relating material. As part of the package, a certificate of title was provided, and on the certificate of title, the fact that the Section 27B of the State-Owned Enterprises Act was identified.
So it wasn't specifically identified, it was just, here's the title, and if you read read and see it, you'll see it.
The title and property information was provided.
Yeah. So where does it get to the position where you say it's unlikely there'll be treaty claims or not probably? There's two properties in particular that has those comments in the relative reports. How did you get to that position? Did iwi come back and say we will not make a treaty claim on this property?
Through the chair, the advice, we sought legal advice on the likelihood of the Section 27B of the Act being triggered. The advice that we have received that it is unlikely to happen. So in answering your question, iwi have not come back and said that, but we have sought legal advice, and that advice is that that the Waitangi Tribunal has only made one recommendation for resumption of private property, and that was settled before the resumption order came out. We've also received legal advice that it is the Crown's preference to seek negotiated settlements with claimants without having to resume properties owned by a third party.
Okay.
So that we're saying the likelihood is slim, not that it isn't there.
Just for you, Mr. Chairman, so the unlikelihood is based on there's only been one before and there's other agreement settlements going down at this time?
That's the legal advice that we've received to date.
Okay, so will the memorials be sought to be taken off the titles when disposed of?
No, the memorials will stay on those titles.
Yeah. So anybody who potentially purchases the property could be faced with the fact that that land could likely be used for treaty settlement.
That's right.
Good up, thank you.
Right, now, just to give you a heads up, folks, we have another meeting which has to start at 1:30, which is effectively a governing body, have your say sort of event, which the Mayor will chair. We have got 5 more sets of questions at this stage. Then we have got 3 amendments, and then we have comments. So I'm just giving you a heads up that we will be adjourning this meeting at probably 1 o'clock, so you can have lunch, and we will be meeting on Friday. Right, Councillor Filipaina.
I won't be able to come.
Thank you, Chair. Just one sort of comment first, if that's okay, just to the Chair of the Independent Māori Statutory Board around Tenga and Te Kauramaki. I had a conversation with Te Warena this morning around it, so and with the comment of a positive response in regards to the letter going out. So we were talking about our yam cha we had on last week. So look, Rod, with your presentation, is there any reason why you didn't cover the last slide? Because that to me was really...
No, there's no reason.
No, I mean, to me it sort of outlined, so I mean that's the first question, so I don't know, Chair, if you wish to go through that, because that outlines to me, I'm assuming everybody's read it, but it just assumes to me that, you know, here's the crux of the reasoning behind option 1 and option 2. So that's just one particular question. So I don't know if you, just it's through you, Chair. The other question I have, do you want me to go through that, or this here?
Yep, no, yep. Keep going.
Okay, so yeah, look, I look forward to that, just the last slide, but...
I can comment on that in a minute. When.
Yeah, so on page 10 of your presentation, there is a mention around status 1, and under our efforts are spread too wide. There was a concern from my perspective with that, and was actually the last bullet point, and it goes to the question from the chair of an independent Māori statutory board around money not being the focus of this whole strategy. Because when I read that last bullet point under our effort is spread too wide, that we should focus on efforts only on what we need and what we can afford. Can you explain that last part? Because to me, that means that, look, it is all about money, and this is why we are doing what we're doing under the status quo. Please.
Yeah, look, it's not about money, but money is important. And, you know, what fundamentally, obviously, we shouldn't spend, because one of our strategies is ratepayer value, and we shouldn't be compelled to spend more money than we need to support Auckland Council operations. And that's what it's really, it's about being prudent or responsible about what we spend. And what we're trying to highlight here, and this is a good slide, but this is there was no reason why I didn't stop here, but this is about office accommodation. It doesn't talk about customer services so much as it relates to local boards and also customer service centres, or about how we're going to have a distributed framework for engagement through our spokes. So this only picks up graphically one part of the strategy, but it does fundamentally show that we've got 103,000, 4,000 square metres, and we end up down with 58,000 square metres, and that's the space required to support our staff. So that is a nice graphical reference on the office accommodation play, which is a big part of what we're trying to achieve to support our operations teams in Auckland Council in a financially prudent way.
So, Chair, just supplementary, and this is why I pointed out your last slide, because one of the main drivers for this is around our staff.
Oh, look.
And I remember that, so look, I'll save my comments to it, but I remember the last time you came here and my questions I asked. So look, I just leave it at that. I just want to confirm that one of the main drivers is around our staff.
Yeah, so the fiscally prudent piece is the opportunity to get it right for our people. But it's more than that. It's about getting it right for our people to deliver good customer service. So if we're efficient the way we deliver property, we can take the opportunity, which is too much space, to deliver good outcomes for our people and ultimately from customer service. And I think you need to make sure that you hear that. We're taking the responsible path around the excess office accommodation space we have. We're looking to divest the office accommodation space because we've got too much, to maximise the value from that, to deliver good outcomes for our people who have been left in the lurch outside the CBD, I might add, and also at Graham Street. And also in order to energise space to deliver good customer service more widely and deeply into the communities. Fundamentally, it's with corporate property, it's not about buildings. We're not developers. It's about delivering the right space for people and the right space to people to do their jobs well. That's what we do. Yeah.
That's why I asked the question. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you. It was an impressive presentation. I have to say the written material was not as satisfactory from my perspective. I had leave of absence for a few weeks, and the last time this was here, I had the report, but I was not able to satisfy myself on some of those things. And so it's been interesting seeing how this has evolved with some changes. From my perspective, I feel this conundrum where I want to be a regional councillor for the purposes of considering this. and it comes down to good governance, which the governance decisions rest with us. Within the policy frameworks we deliver to you, you know, you are trying to come forward. But then officers tend to revert to ward-based councillors or decisions. And I guess I have to signal that I find it interesting, and you might like to answer me on this, why you would refer to ward councillors on some of these decisions when they are actually regional decisions for regional councillors and not with others. So that left some disquiet, and there is nothing like talking about office accommodation, whether it's Albert Street or the CAB or whatever else, to trigger a measure of discomfort amongst politicians, I've got to tell you. So I'd really like you to comment on why you've worked with ward councillors in some situations but not in others.
Good question. We've reached out. Sorry, if I may, Chair, I can respond to that. We tried to reach out to all councillors to discuss the proposal, and the people that responded to, we sat down with on a number of occasions.
Yeah, sorry, I was a little bit blind, but I now understand the question. So we have reached out twice to all councillors as part of this group, and also individually to the councillors, including yourself on 2 occasions, to request meeting times with you to walk through the presentation, because I think it's very important that you understand the delivery and what's the complex of all of this, even though it's a simple proposition in the end. So,
sorry, I've got a bit of backlog going on here, and I accept that you contacted me, but I just wanted that clarification.
Yeah, I've reached out to all ward councillors individually who have not met with us on 2 occasions.
So you do not make decisions based, like if you're going to send off a letter to, in the case of, might be one of the situations we might have had discussed today.
Oh, okay, I see where you're going.
I mean, I don't want to labour that, and I would really hope for the future officers, as part of the good policy and, you know, the right information coming forward, that you will consider all councillors as regional councillors for the purposes of governance for these types of decisions. So my question actually just follows. Can we go back to B just for a moment? I appreciate the intention of the chair to try and deal with some of the concerns that have been expressed today, but I'm just a little bit perplexed about you've got feedback and input. Well, I could get really pedantic about whether it's feedback or input or whether it's, and to use the words that the Deputy Mayor used, I would have taken B to be about discussion. So if we take Pukekohe as that specific example there, that is going to be more about a discussion rather than, it's about trying to get two-way communication, not one-way. So if I look at the wording there, and I really struggle to read this here, but outlining future strategic outcomes will be communicated to the respective local board. I mean, that sounds a little bit top-down, in my opinion. Am I being, I mean, was this B one that officers proposed, or was this one that came from the chair? Because I think it could be better expressed to perhaps alleviate some of the concerns that people like myself might have at the moment. Yeah. Because I know if I think back to the 6 years that I sat on the board of Auckland Transport, where we talked extensively about park and rides for Pukekohe, it was always with the intention of perhaps that being the site that might be available for use. So I think, without wanting to labour things too much, there is an outcome that can be there that's going to accommodate everyone's concerns, but the language of the resolution needs to be correct. So,
okay, it was a joint resolution, but we could change communicated to discussed.
Yeah, to discuss.
Seconder, happy with that? Yep.
Feedback
and
input.
change that to discussed. Okay.
What's the difference between feedback and input?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Well, I would have got rid of the feedback and input and just had for discussions with the respective local boards.
That would have dealt with it.
I think it's important you get the feedback.
Yeah, true.
For discussion with the local board and feedback, but feedback and input, you know, what do you...
We're not trying to be tricky with it, that's all I'll just say. We're just trying
Well, I'm glad you're not trying to be tricky.
accommodating here, really, that's where we're trying to come from.
Accommodating.
I think at the moment we leave it as it is, and I hear we've just made a change there for discussion.
You have
It's for
changed it to
discussion,
discussions with the
discussion,
respective local board
discussions.
for their feedback.
And
You want feedback.
and reflections.
Okay, I have Councillor Hills, Councillor Lee, then Councillor Walker and Councillor Watson.
It was just a quick question, because we've been focusing mostly on moving, but the North Shore rental is about $6 million a year, and often you can go in there and there's virtually no one in those offices, but we have to stay there till 2021. Will you be using that time to look for new premise for the local board, or will you be filling that largely empty spaces with other subleases in the meantime?
We are, of course, through the chair, looking for sublease opportunities all the time. It's compromised given that there's a lease expiring, so continuity. But even then, we're working with the new landlord to try and work around that and vacate earlier if we can. We're certainly, and the idea is that this is well planned, and I've signalled that a number of times to the Finance Performance Committee. And so we, subject to approval, we'll go straight out and start beginning our search and communicating with the local board on the right opportunities for the local board space within that area. So thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, thank
the
you.
answer is yes.
Councillor Lee.
Yes. The presentation was summed up that the selling off approach was motivated by two things: customer service and quality space for quote unquote our people, meaning council staff. Outside this room, there's a great deal of cynicism about this, and that outside this room, much more emphasis is given to, I think it's section 22, which talks about a 117 million hole in the council budget that this will be hoped to patch up. So in relationship to budgetary considerations, why do you not also mention that when you talk about customer service and quality space for our people? Because it all sounds very beneficial and very human, but I think it would be more frank to talk about our budgetary problem.
Well, I think we have done that.
Kevin?
Oh, you go.
Actually, I was just leaning forward, Chair.
Well, actually, you don't need to answer that because that was not a question.
I think we have done
that.
That
was not a question. So, Councillor Walker?
Sure. Just a few quick questions, and I'm happy with a yes or no. In this strategy you're putting forward, has there been any consideration of civil defence requirements?
Yes, there has.
Okay. And the next question, has there been some preliminary work on the costs of these hubs? And in particular, I'm referring to the possibility of Albany or Westgate, and obviously the high cost of locating in those locations.
Yes, there has.
Okay. And then the last question, in terms of accessibility to people, and I'm not talking about people working in the buildings, but people visiting them, has there been consideration given to transport requirements and in particular parking?
Yes, there has.
That'll do.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. And, all good. Similarly require short answers to these ones. We had quite a bit of talk about our people, and I think I mentioned this to you guys when I talked. When I went round the Orewa office, without exception, the clear message I got from all the people I talked to was that they enjoyed working there, they enjoyed their current conditions, they wanted to stay there, and that was people from the East Coast Bays, from Albany, from all over the Hibiscus Coast. So my question is, has there been any systematic survey of the staff at these locations where there's actually everyone's been given an opportunity to actually articulate their desires, and do those figures actually exist?
Yes, through the Chair. We've recently received our engagement survey results. We've had a look at the results from the various buildings. The Orewa 2 buildings rate the lowest of all our corporate office buildings in terms of overall engagement. There are lots of drivers to overall engagement, but I did look specifically at questions targeted around having the right infrastructure and support to do work, and again the Orewa buildings come out
So they had the lowest response rate, is what you're saying, isn't
yes,
it?
they had the lowest
rating.
engagement
Rating.
Yeah, the lowest rating, sorry, the lowest percentage engagement rating.
Okay, so what percentage of people responded?
I think our overall engagement survey, we had about 85% response rate.
All right. So are they available for us
Yes,
to look
they
at?
are.
Okay, I
Yes,
appreciate
they
that. The other question goes to the number of sites. We've got 7 sites here, various degrees of issues on each one. Was any thought given the amount of money that's at stake and the importance of local community, was any consideration given to site visit for councillors to actually go and see these sites that we're proposing to dispose of before a decision's made? Yeah, actually seeing the sites that people are going to vote to dispose of.
Well, we haven't planned for councillors to visit those sites, but you know,
okay. Well,
happy to assist if that's.
I would just make the point that in legacy councils, if we dare go back to legacy days, if there was any significant decision to do with assets or land, people actually went and physically saw what they're talking about, because I wouldn't have a clue about some of these sites up here, just as I'm sure as there's a lot of people here wouldn't have a clue the difference between the Tasman and the Pacific building in Orewa when we're talking about it. Final question. The Albert Street HQ is included in the portfolio. Is there any funds in this process that's going in any shape or form to the $31 million plus upgrade to the facade that continues to meet us each day we go into that office?
Through the Chair, 93% of the budget spent outside of the CBD. There is a very small proportion within the CBD, largely to accommodate people from Graham Street.
But none that relates to the cladding program of work.
Apologies, yeah.
It's 135 Albert Street.
Right, thank you. Right, we've got through the questions on that. We're going to go to the First Amendment, which is, and I'm going to be strict with standing orders. There'll be 3 for and 3 against, if there are that many for or against, for that matter.
Just, sorry, point of order, Mr. Chair. I just thought you had signalled earlier in your statement that this was going to be adjourned to Friday. Is that not the case now?
No, I'm rethinking this. We're going to get through this and getting whispers around that people want to get it over and done with today. So we will, maybe if this one is quick, we will then go and have a break. We will then have the 1:30 meeting with Mana Whenua consultation, and then after that meeting we will resume this meeting. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, quickly, and I accept that not everyone's necessarily going to support my amendment. If people don't want to support it, then my view is to just vote it down. If you support my amendment, I think there's very good reasons for it, then please vote for it because I was. I think there are quite good arguments here. The Papakura Local Board has come to us today and they've simply requested that there needs to be a process of consideration around the Metropolitan Papakura Town Centre Master Plan, which is a piece of work which this should be part of, and it can be part of it, and a resolution to proceed today in relation to the disposal of the site can't take effect. I would refer members to page 33 in the agenda, attachment C, the property report for Coles Crescent, Papakura. At paragraph 5, the second sentence spells it out. The trust deed requires the property to remain in council's ownership for this purpose for a period of 99 years from 1922. In 2021, On the expiry of the covenant, council can dispose of the property should it wish to do so. That's what we have to live with at that particular site. That is not contested. So in terms of the concern about the unpacking of the properties, the reality is in relation to this site, you have no choice because the deed applies, and it applies to 2021. That gives the scope for the work to take place in relation to the master planning. It also allows for clarification as to how Panuku will recommend the unlock, support, transform, whatever. That has not been formally confirmed yet. The discussion is still taking place. So, Chair, I would ask that my amendment be voted through so that it can be part of the substantive to give effect to what we already face. You can't sell Coles Crescent now. You're already up for maintenance of Coles Crescent because of the legacy deed, whether you like it or not. And there is a need for more master planning work, which the local board has signalled its intention to participate in because it actually supports change at the site. So I would commend the amendment and look forward to the division and all the support that will come with that. From Al Filipina.
Right, well, is there anyone else who wants to speak on this motion?
Can I just ask a question, sorry, Mr. Chair? So you said this is a 4 to 6 year strategy. You knew about this. Isn't that you've taken all that into consideration, though, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Redundant.
Just.
Sorry.
So it's just supplementary. So you know you can't sell it, so you won't sell it.
That's right.
Right. Fine. Great.
It's in the report.
Yeah, no, I know. So I just
Read
don't
the
understand.
report.
I know. So I don't understand why we're having the amendment when it actually.
So you wanted to speak?
It already.
Okay, well, we have an amendment.
Sorry, it was
It's
just a question.
it is a legitimate amendment, so
Put the motion.
I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour?
By division, please.
By division, right. We will start by division.
I don't understand it.
Councillor Bartley.
Against.
Councillor Casey.
No.
Councillor Cashmore.
No.
Councillor Cooper.
No.
Councillor Darby.
Against.
Councillor Filipina.
Against.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Mayor Goff.
No.
Councillor Hills.
No.
Oh, Hills.
No, Hills. No, Hills.
That's for that Sunday, was it?
So no for both, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Newman.
Or
Councillor Simpson.
No.
Member Taipari.
No.
Excuse me, I voted against.
Yeah, I was going to clarify that at the end.
Get that?
Councillor Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
or
Councillor Clow.
No. Right, so that is lost by XYZ, which
Still
is
can't sell it.
when it flicks up.
But it's actionable anyway. It's
Okay,
not happening.
it's lost 5 votes to 12.
the action is he'll be paying
Right.
for the maintenance.
We're going to move on to the next amendment, which is Councillor Watson and Councillor Walker's amendment, which reads, by way of replacement, the Auckland Council consult with the community to explore all options that exist for both the disposal and retention of land and buildings at 50 Centreway Road, Orewa. Do we have any speakers?
Yeah, you sure do.
2 of them.
There's 3 of them.
So I should ask, I suppose, do you have any questions? And I'm hoping you'll say no, so it's just speaking, yes?
Yeah, just speaking to the
Yep.
to the amendment. And I'd just say at the outset, I think Councillor Fletcher made a very worthwhile point very early on in the proceedings about how this particular paper doesn't address all the issues that have been raised, and particularly those that have been raised by the local boards that spoke to us today, and I think that's unfortunate. What I see here is a pretty clear disconnect between the corporate property strategy, which has been driven by the officers, and I understand what their brief is, but what's missing, Mr Chair, is a balance between what might loosely be termed a civic strategy. That's just non-existent, and particularly as it goes to Orewa. And I hope our speakers earlier on made it clear that the particular site in Orewa is the civic heart of our community. It's not just the Tasman building or the Pacific building. It's more than that. It's accumulation of a number of features to do with council chambers of some significance. No, not a little back office, as is the case in other parts of my ward, which actually, frankly, it's actually embarrassing that local boards hold their meetings there. This is a council chambers of some history and of some substance. It's set within beautiful landscape grounds with artwork and sculptures, a public exhibition display of our council's history down through the decades. This is a place our community assemble at and which has importance to them for that civic function. And I note, and that was a point I tried to bring up in the questioning, that the council may choose to consult on sites where there's an intrinsic link to the land. Well, I've just said there is an intrinsic link to the land here. It's not just any old site that can be replicated elsewhere. There's a combination of elements that are at work here that our community values, and you owe it to them, I suggest, as guardians of the civic interest of our great city, to actually just give those people the opportunity to express themselves. And that's all this amendment's asking to do, just to allow people to consult. And the officers said that they were willing to do that. Indeed, that it might be worthwhile to actually find out what people in this wider community actually think, because it's a big community. These officers in the last few years have been serving a population of well over 160,000 people. I'll say that again, 160,000 people have been accessing this facility in one form or another. In terms of the immediate area of the Hibiscus Coast, there's 10,000 people that will be in Millwater in a couple of years' time. It'll be finished. It will then jump the motorway to Milldale, where another 10,000 will go in, and then if we go down to Derry Flat, there'll be another 10,000. And Orewa is a central point for all those various communities. That doesn't seem to have been factored in to any of these considerations today, nor has the massive nature of this site. This is the biggest site we're looking to dispose of. There are a number of options here, not just disposing. That's the easy way out. Anyone can do that, just get rid of it. It's a 19,000 square metre site. There are two distinct buildings. One of the buildings was built only just before the Super City, so it's in pristine condition. It was built at a cost of over 20 odd million. The CV for the whole site is 28 million, and we're reliably informed that we'll get nothing like that. So in my calculation, Mr. Chair, we'll actually be engaging in something of a fire sale here, because the best price we'll get will be under half of what the investment in these properties have been in relatively recent times. That was just one building, the Tasman building, which is currently receiving a leasehold income. The rush process, I think, isn't helping that, and I think what the local board is asking for and what we're asking for is just a chance to consider the options here. Personally, I think a case can be made for partial disposal here, essentially half the site, and that would have a very significant income. So we're willing to play a part. We're not saying don't sell anything. We're saying there's an opportunity here to make a substantial sale that will satisfy both the civic side of things and the corporate property portfolio. And I think the officers could, with goodwill, the goodwill that we've heard repeated a number of times, could actually come to some arrangement with the community, with the local board. Because at stake here, Mr. Chair, and I think the local board referred to it, is more than just these properties. And this seems to be a penny that's taking a little while to drop. There's a lot of discontent the further north you go. And this will feed into this discontent. If you think that this is just a sale that's going to go through unnoticed, you're going to be sorely disappointed. People do feel that there's a city-centric focus here. The opposite almost of the of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. They were herding everyone out into the countryside. We're sort of bringing everyone into the city centre or to these major hubs, and that's not received very warmly. Neither is the notion that these asset sales, these substantial asset sales, are taking place without any community consultation. This is the one example of this. We've got a couple of marinas that are in a similar vein here. So people are saying, why are we not getting a say in this? Not even the token notion of actually going out and giving people the opportunity to express what they think about it.
You're at 6 minutes.
Okay, so that's entirely undesirable. And I think, Mr. Chair, you know, if we took another historical analogy here, this kind of fire sale, this asset sales, I mean, the number of people in our community are old enough to remember the Roger Gnomes of the late 80s and early 90s where the New Zealand society was ambushed by a series of big disposals of state-owned assets. This is the council version of that happening now. People don't find out what's going on. We're at a meeting last night to do with the sale of the Gulf Harbour Marina, and people were saying how large numbers of people didn't even realise the meeting was on. So we've got a real problem here with the perception in the north and with what's actually happening on the ground in disposal of these assets. This amendment, Mr. Chair, offers this committee the opportunity to consult with the community, to explore options which will involve disposal of a substantial part of their site.
Watching you way over 7 minutes.
I think you get 10 minutes when you're leading off with the amendment. Certainly that's what happens with the mayor when he's in the chair. So I'll just finish off anyway, Mr. Chair.
For an amendment.
I'm probably only speaking to a couple of people here because you can just see with the body language that, you know, the deals have been struck behind the scenes with some of the other. Well, it's true. We've already heard that, and some of us are, you know, battling to just get our communities a fair suck of the sab. It's not fair. It's not good for the council. And I look forward to some of our leading figures perhaps going up our way over the next year and explaining to people why they haven't even the courtesy to consult with them when they dispose of their significant civic assets. That's a conversation I like to be in. So please, those few people that do have some sense of listening to local boards, to listening to local communities, please consider that when you come to vote on this very mild amendment that still allows for disposal, significant disposal, but has the courtesy to consult with the local community. I think that's what you're elected for.
Thank you, John. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure, so I'll add to the comments of my fellow councillor from the Albany ward. I've got a real concern in principle around this whole item because of the lack of consideration of any civic strategy. This city, as it stands, does not have a civic strategy. If you go to Wikipedia and you look at the definition of civic centre, town square, town hall, seat of local government, village green, there are a whole range of words that encapsulate that go well back in time. You won't find any consideration of that in this strategy. None. So from my perspective, and I would suggest from the perspective of people in Auckland, that is a severe deficiency. In time, right now we're at a point where the city is still recovering from an amalgamation that many people, if you speak to, have questions about. In fact, I'm asked on an ongoing basis, has it worked or not? And certainly the perspective of many people across a range of criteria is that it hasn't. So I do not see the urgency of this, given our mandate in perpetual succession. I would suggest to have a civic strategy. That's one point. The second point that I have is around geography. And the geography of Auckland is not going to change. It's a city that's dispersed. It's got a north, south, east and west. It's got an area which amounts to half of the Auckland region. That is the legacy Rodney District Council, which doesn't exist right now. That location in Orewa was selected because it was roughly in the centre of that large area. So it could satisfy the democratic requirements of that area to congregate, to get together, to have some centre, to be able to get to from the perspective of accessibility and so on. That requirement geographically still exists. It still exists, but it will be lost, and lost in part because we have no civic consideration afoot here. I have a real concern that as a councillor I'm being asked to make a decision without knowing where these hubs are going to go. No idea. No idea whether those hubs are going to work in terms of costs. The cost of locating at Albany is likely to be very expensive. The Ministry of Justice and other facilities are actively moving out of Albany, for example, because there's a massive parking shortage, because there's no parking in apartments. You've got to park on the street. There's no street parking. There's scarcely any commercial parking. It's dynamite. Yet people are going to have to get to these facilities. People that work there and the Aucklanders and the people from much of the region that are going to need to go there. So the geography is suspect. The civic aspect is suspect in terms of options. As my fellow councillor John Watson has pointed out, there are other options that could be considered here in terms of partial sell down. The officers told us that they're having difficulty finding somebody to lease it. For goodness sake, if you can't find someone to lease it to, you're going to have real problems trying to find someone to sell it to. But in terms of an area to locate, an even larger facility, it may have significant merit. From a geographical perspective, it's got great transport linkages. From a sustainability perspective, walking, cycling. There's a big park next to it. There's a theatre complex associated with it. It's got a lot going for it that is actually not acknowledged in this report. And I venture to say scarcely any of the people around this table here that are making a decision have actually been through the facility at large, checked the grounds out, and enjoyed the sense of place and history that it has. The community knows that. My community knows that. And I can assure you that they are opposed to this. And I would suggest that they're opposed to it for good reason. And once it's gone, that will be another retrograde step that this council has made.
Thank you, Wayne. Councillor Casey.
Yeah, I won't take my 5 minutes, but I just want to thank Chris and Julia and Caitlin for coming down today and putting the case against the sale, because it is quite important that you do that, because that's what you feel and you're elected to represent the people of your area. It's a hard thing to do, and I've had experience in the past of supporting the Pukei Tapapa local board who wanted to oppose a land swap, and it was lost. And it's a hard thing to do because, but you have to do it. You have to do it. You've been given that responsibility by us to place make in your area. And you feel that you haven't been able to do that in this case adequately within the time frame, which is today for making this decision. But, you know, we extended the time frame for one local board so there could be a Waitakere solution, and there is a Waitakere solution. It's a good one. And all that this amendment's doing is asking for the same consideration to be given to the Biscuits and Bays local board.
Hurry.
And one of the ways they say that that can be best done, and there is wriggle room because we checked that out during the debate, is to actually consult with the people up there, because they've got a feeling at the moment that they're out of the loop, that, you know, we've heard Queen Street centric, city centric. Well, this is a chance to say, actually, we're listening. And it's, you know, I think I've also learned it's not absolutely critical if one of these sites doesn't go through today. So that's all that this is doing. I think this would be a really good move for this council. It would be saying to the Hibiscus and Bays local board, thank you for coming, we've heard you, and we're going to do what you say. And it may come back with a similar solution, a different solution, or a compromise like Waitakere. So.
Right, there have been 3 consecutive speakers for the resolution. Councillor Simpson, are you for or against?
It was a question, Mr Chairman, to the staff, is
okay.
that the...
Same as the last question.
amendment suggested, do you feel that you have done that?
Of course they are.
Engaged with the local community. Well, through the local board, through the chairman, we have engaged through the local board, and we've done that to all of the impacted local boards where the disposals are proposed. So in the same way, and we've answered their questions in that regard and engaged with them in that same way across all of the local boards to gather their feedback and factor that into the decision.
Consult with the community, right?
I'll call for a division, Mr Chair.
I think I have Councillor Hill. I'll get him.
Yeah, just a quick question, and I may have heard wrong, but did Councillor Watson use Pol Pot as an example? That's
He did.
liking the actions of our staff to genocide and the murder of millions of people?
I actually qualified it, if you listen, the movement of people in an inverse proportion to Pol Pot. They put people out into the countryside. We're proposing to take people, nothing to do with the atrocities, the movement of people, Councillor Hills. Yeah.
That's true.
I tried to explain the analogy, maybe you listened
I will
next time.
rule that was, it was on the edge there, but you did talk about the movement. You're quite correct. Right, by division, we're going to put this.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Filipaina. Yep.
Okay, just a question again to staff, because then, depending on the result of this question, will depend whether I speak for or against it, and knowing that there are three that are already supporting the amendment. So my question is in regards to the delay, because I don't see anything up there in regards to a time frame. But if there is a delay for it, what, if any, repercussions will it have on the strategy? And two, wouldn't it be better because to have a time limit if in fact it goes through? So look, those are the two questions, because if there's a time limit, I may end up voting. If it's not, I will vote against it, and I will say why.
Chair, if I may respond to that. So we've considered this as a whole of portfolio approach.
Yeah.
As I tried to explain earlier, but if we start to unpick buildings, we really then have to, we haven't got any certainty in the overall programme. So, that's then a value piece that we can't rely on. Then we have to start picking out costs to suit that. In terms of time frame, as it relates particularly to Orewa, I think I mentioned earlier that there's a $10 million shortfall over the 10-year LTP cycle on the maintenance funding. That equates to sort of $100,000 a month, roughly speaking. So for every month you take, I suppose, rough numbers, you would accrue that.
Chair, so look, I'm going to speak and vote against it. And look, and here are my reasons. One, in regards to the significant engagement policy, we've already had staff, and this has been confirmed that, look, for us, it's a regional issue. We're regional councillors sitting around this table. Well, we're actually regional councillors, Councillor Casey. I mean, and I didn't interrupt you, just to let you know. I have my regional hat on, but for me, I look at all regional issues. So for me, it's a decision that we have to make regionally. And I mean, we ended up, and I take the point that Councillor Watson said around the monies and the value that we have for Orewa around the building. We only had a small building in Manukau, still quite a few $1 million, but we saw the benefit from the regional strategy, and that's talking to the local board around this. I mean, I also, from my perspective, I didn't like the comment, and for me, I'm not going to end up saying things behind anybody's back, but I didn't like the comment when, look, deals have been done. There's been no deals done with me, I can tell you now. There's been no deals at all. I raised questions at the first time that our staff came here, and mine was all centred on staff. It really was, hence the 10 metres squared. So, this is why I thank you for at least having that appointment that I ended up asking questions. The fact that Italia was there, whose Manukau used to be in the Manukau City Council, was good from my perspective. But I am voting against the amendment as a councillor with my regional hat on. This is why I asked the question through you, Chair. So, look, I'll be making a stand. I know I'm not going to make that many friends out in Orewa. I don't think I had that many out there anyway. But, you know, for me, it's around that regional context and me as a regional councillor. Thank you.
Point of clarification, Mr Chairman. Last week I was denied a question because we'd had a time for questions and we were on to the debate, but just for future reference, so I know when I can ask my questions and when I can debate, do we have both questions and comments at the same time with this committee?
At times you do.
Okay,
Questions and
thank you.
clarification. Questions and clarification, you can.
Okay, put the motion.
Right, there's no one else indicating they want to speak in support, so I'm going to put it. Did I hear someone say by division? Yes, by
please.
division.
Thank
Right, we will put it by division.
Councillor Bartley.
I'm going to abstain.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Councillor Cashmore.
No.
Councillor Cooper. No. Councillor Darby.
Against.
Councillor Filipina.
Against.
Councillor Fletcher. For. Mayor Goff.
No.
Councillor Hills.
No.
Councillor Hulse.
Against.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Newman.
Of course. Yes.
Councillor Simpson. No. Member Taipari.
No.
Councillor Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Clow.
No. Right, so that has been lost 6 to 10 with one abstention. So, right, well, we're right up against the wall. We've got about 6 minutes for lunch. So we have a motion there that is going to adjourn the meeting, and it's been moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Cashmore, the meeting adjourned until the conclusion of the governing body workshop for Mana Whenua today. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Right, thank you.
Mr Chair, you have to vote abstentions after.